right, welcome to week 3 for the CDC tying session. This week we're going to focus on just tying your basic little nymph like this. And the focus is really going to be on two things. One, obviously the CDC, which we'll get into right away as we're going to use it for the tail. But also what's known as the V-cut. And I kind of touched on it a little bit in week 1. But this week we're going to really dive into the V-cut and what it allows you to do. Now this particular tying method works very well for not just CDC but many other feathers as well. So we'll kind of dive into that and why it's a good technique to have in your arsenal. So what I have in the vise is a size 12 hook. It's paired with a 1/8 brass Cyclops bead. The thread I'm using is 8/0 iron gray uni. And a very popular choice for many tires is to add extra weight by backing this with lead or lead-free wire and sliding it up into the bead. And you can absolutely do that here. We're not going to do that on this particular video just because we were trying to keep the material list down for what everybody needed to obtain for this particular session because it was already starting to grow pretty long. But you can absolutely back that if you want to. So I'm just going to start my thread behind the bead. I'm just going to work a little ways back. We don't need to be super precise or anything with our thread wraps. It's going to all be dubbed. And I'm going to work back just kind of into the thorax area. I'm going to work back forward to the bead. And then you can trim this out. Now, for those of you that are tired of trimming this out, what you can do is take your bobbin, grab a hold of it very firmly, where you've really got it. Pull straight down on your thread so you've got tension, and then pull your thread forward and it'll snap it off. I know you've seen probably David McPhail and other fly tires do that. I'm not sure that I've ever covered that before. So anyway, I just figured I'd kind of throw it out there. So what we're going to do is just take our thread to the back. You can just kind of get down there quickly. We don't have to be very neat on the body here. I'm going to stop my thread at about the barb. So what we're looking to do is, again, we want to select the correct CDC for this. So in this case, this big, long, extra select will work perfect for these little nymphs because we don't need a lot of it. And this one feather will cover the tail and the legs. Sorry, I know that was a little blurry. So as you're going through your CDC, find a nice long one. And I didn't actually pre-select it. I should have. Sorry. So here's a nice long one. You can see that it's much bigger than this hook. So the first thing we want to do is, like we've done with so many other materials, get to the bare stem by pinching the tip and drawing fibers to the back so that we can expose the bare stem. And then we're going to cut this tip out. Now you can absolutely save that tip to use as a puff or something along those lines. Didn't quite get that where I wanted it. There we go. I want it nice and even. Okay. So as we draw all of our fibers forward towards where the tip used to be, you should have something that looks about like that. What we want to do is gently stroke all these fibers forward so they start to lay in the same direction. And this will help gather and bundle more fibers towards the tail tip, which is what we're looking for. And so in order to help do that, I'm going to go about halfway down the feather when I pinch, and I'll stop. I'm going to place 2 to 3 wraps. I'm going to start my stem on the side so it rolls up top. And I'm going to place 2 to 3 wraps right on the top so that the feather is trapped like so. Next, what I want to do, just like with other feathers, but CDC in particular, because it likes to shift and move, and it's sort of delicate. I'm going to pinch these tail fibers, and I'm going to lift up on the stem and start to slide it forward. The reason you want to lift up is because if you don't, your thread's going to start to move, your tail will move, and everything else. You want to be able to keep this all collected and right where you want it. So you start to monkey with it too much and it'll move on you, and we don't want that. So I'm going to just place a few more thread wraps in. I'll do it again. 1, 2, 3. Pinch on both ends. Lift up. And pull. Now what we're looking to do, as you can kind of see, I've got this stem hanging out, and we want to go past that stem, so you can actually kind of collect all the tips like so and draw them until you have passed that stem, or the stem is now into the abdomen of the fly, allowing just your CDC fibers to be the tail. You want to take your time at this point and make sure that you've got the tail length where you want it. If you're not sure how to gauge this, what you can do is get a stiff pair of scissors so that when they open up, they actually hold distance. And since you want the tail to be about the length of the body, you can just line this up and say, okay, that's a little bit long, and make small adjustments using a scissor or a pair of scissors as a gauge until you get to wherever it is you want to be. So maybe you want it extra long. It's really up to you there. The idea is that you don't cut this, and when it sits kind of flared open like so. And so that'll work. Okay. Now we're going to tie this in coming forward, keeping this on top of the hook shank. This helps build symmetry in the fly. And we're going to take it up right to the bead and trim this out. Now save this feather because, again, this feather is going to be used for the leg part as well. Next we're going to add our rib. And actually you can add your rib first if you like. So what I've got here is small gold oval tinsel. Whoop. Sorry, it's a little cold and it slipped right out of my fingers. I can get my half frozen hands to collect it. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to slide this up into the bead and collect it on the bottom side. Whoop. Doesn't want to play nice. There we go. And I'm going to tie this in on the bottom side. Bringing it back. And there's that. So the colors are all multi-changeable, right? So if you're looking to do a green nymph or something like that, switch to green. If you want gray, brown, tan, whatever it is you want. As far as the color scheme is concerned, use the colors that you want. You don't have to stick with this. This is not a specific pattern for a specific mayfly nymph. This is more of, let's learn to use these techniques and help you along with CDC. So what I've got here for the body is some Spirit River Antron dubbing in the color of squirrel belly. So it's basically like a ginger tan type color, and that's what I'll be using. Now I'm going to get a fair amount of it, and I don't need this much. With like most dubbing, you want to make sure as you stretch it out, you can see that it's all sort of in line. If you're using a dubbing that's not in line, make sure you pinch, pull, reset it, pinch, pull, reset it. And what this will do is allow your dubbing to become more in line, similar to this. Again, this is way more than I need, and I don't mind that so much. So I'm going to start to dub this on. And you can taper the body, you can leave the body thin. This is kind of an option thing, right? Like, how do you want your fly to look? What type of mayfly are you imitating in your water? You want to take those things into consideration when you're building some of these flies. So I'm just going to start it. I'm just going to place about a turn and a half over. I'm going to pinch and pull and start to wrap. If the dubbing's giving you fits, lick your fingers gently, twist the dubbing around, place a wrap or two, maybe 3, and just start working it forward. We're going to take this up to the bead. And what this does is this gives us a foundation for our actual thorax part of the fly. So once you have it where you want, you can take this, you can trim this out. When you do this with dubbing, make sure you trim it out on the top side when a wing case is involved. The reason for that is because you can see I've got a little nub of dubbing right up top. So as it's up top, and once we get to the wing case is actually going to cover that up, and it's going to make the bottom of the fly look perfect. So next we're going to rib the fly. We're looking for, 3, 4, 5 turns. This part isn't super important for this particular fly. A lot of it's going to depend on the size of fly that you're tying. And so you can kind of do what you want there, right? I mean, you can use wire, you could use thread, it depends on what you want to do, and again, our focus isn't really on that. So I'm going to reverse my material to the back, and I'm going to work my thread back with my rib on top until I get to where I want the thorax to start on the back side. This is typically going to be about a bodkin and a half, 2 bodkin widths behind the eye. You want to have your abdomen, this section here, longer than the thorax, because the thorax, when you look at the way a fly is constructed, typically the head is a part of the thorax as far as what's considered the 1/3 mark. And so if we were to take from this section to the front of the bead, we're at about 1/3 of the fly. Or again, you could, if you wanted to start to get a little more precise, you could take a stiff pair of scissors or something like that, a pair of calipers, say 1, 2, and then this brings me out to right into where the bend of the hook would start. And once we have that, we can actually trim this out. Okay, so now let's get into the wing case. So what I have here is actually just 1/8 of an inch stretchy scud back. It's a popular choice. And you've noticed that I've got this just huge length of material. This is probably 18 inches worth. Some people like to cut this down into a particular size. I think some people find it easier to use that way. I don't, and it's for one specific reason. Is when I actually go to pull the wing case over and then reverse the material to tie it back in, I want to be able to stretch this as far as I can get it, and if I only have this much room to grab and pinch, you actually almost stretch it to the point where it's just going to slide back up underneath your thread, and then you've essentially wasted your wing case and you have to kind of undo the fly and start it again. So I've trimmed this to a point, and we'll just tie this in going forward just up to behind the bead. You just want to make sure that this is sitting somewhat flat on top of the hook shank so that it makes a nice wing case for you. I'm going to clip this out of my way. And now for the thorax. I'm just going to go back to the dubbing. You could use peacock herl. You could change colors of dubbing. You can do really whatever you want here as far as that's concerned. So I'm going to bring my thread back to where the wing case starts. Some people will add a little hot spot. All kinds of stuff. So let your imagination run here. Slide this forward again, just to turn it in half. I can twist, turn, twist, turn. And so going back to when we built the original abdomen and why we dubbed all the way forward, what that does or did was help build this underbody so that we can actually make this underbody much larger and more pronounced, which actually is going to act like a prop for our CDC to become legs. And that can be kind of important. If it's too big, you'll notice, and if it's too small, everything's just going to collapse on you, and you're not going to get the full effect of letting that CDC ride kind of in a V wedge and actually act as legs. Sometimes doing this method on smaller flies, say down into the 20 range, the CDC can actually act as sort of like a gill for some nymphs. So there's a benefit of that. Just meaning that the CDC will start to collect and trap little bubbles along it, because that's what it does when it's underwater. And again, I'm going to take my dubbing and cut it out on the top side so that that part is hidden. The fly slid just a little bit. There we go. Okay. You have two ways to go about this. You can tie your CDC in now, or you can tie it in after you've brought your wing case over. It's really up to you which way you want to go. On this particular kind of technique, I'm not sure that there's a super huge benefit to one over the other. We just want the nymph to kind of look like a nymph, and you can actually obtain both of it one way or either way. If you bring your wing case over first, you need to be very confident in your thread wrapping ability. The amount of thread wraps that you're going to need to trap this could potentially increase, and so you want to make sure that you're careful of that. If you're not super sure about or confident in your collar building ability, then I would suggest to put your legs in first. So to put the legs in first, what we want to do is the same exact method, the V cut. And we're going to split this apart. We're going to trim this out. That little nub there, I don't like it. So that we have this. Again, we're going to stroke all the fibers. Like, this technique doesn't change for the legs and the tail. It's the same technique. So that we have something like this. If your CDC barbs are long enough, you can absolutely come down over the top. Your CDC is going to ride high on the wing case, just meaning it's going to be kind of up more like this. Some people like that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I suggest taking the concave side and facing it down towards the actual shank, like so. And then that will allow your legs to ride about like this. If you have a rotary vise, which is very nice to use on something like this, flip your fly upside down. I'm sorry if you've zoomed in and it went out of camera, but again, we're going to use the same kind of technique where we're drawing all the fibers forward like so to where the tip used to be, and we're going to tie it in on the stem. And this part can be a little tricky, so just place a couple of thread wraps over to allow yourself to be able to maneuver the stem so that it lines up with the actual hook shank itself. I'm going to take my left thumb and left index and grab the tips. I'm going to take my right thumb, right index, and again lift up and start to slide everything towards the hook eye very slowly. You need to go very slowly here, and we're going to do this until the stem slides out from the tie-in point. I've got a little bit of stem left there. By doing this, you're actually allowing your fingers to trap the fibers on the left and right side, and that's what's going to provide the legs. So this is kind of a finesse technique, so take your time. Right? Now I've got my legs underneath and the stem is out. If you want your legs directly underneath like that, that's absolutely fine. If you want them to splay more to the left and right, we will do that in just a second. First, you want to place about 2 thread wraps over, just to make sure we have some extra kind of locking power in place. And now you can actually come through and grab the CDC fibers and move them to the side. This stuff can be somewhat daunting and a little tricky. And again, we're going to pinch on the side. Sorry, I know my thumb's in the way. I don't mean for the camera to be blurry. And we're going to gently pull. And what's going to slowly happen is they're actually going to move to the left and right. And they're going to start to open up to the left and the right. Sort of like that. And you can always just help them along by just simply grabbing them and just shifting them where you want them to be. You can take your thumb, press down and split, so that they're like so. If you end up not liking that look, you can, at this point, you literally can just take everything, collect it again, pull it straight up, tighten down, and they'll bring it all back underneath so that they're back underneath the fly. So there's kind of some finesse technique when it comes to putting the legs in right here and how you want those legs to sit and how you want them to look. So play around with it a little bit. And again, this is option stuff. This is not, it has to be done one way or the other. Both ways are fine. So we're just going to add a few more thread wraps right behind the bead. Again, for stuff like this, I like fingernail clippers. And then you still have this CDC here that you can use and save for something else. And now for the big finish, we're just going to take our scud back. We're going to bring it over the top. So we've got our fly where we want it. And if the legs are a little crooked and all that kind of stuff, don't worry about that. If it really drives you nuts, we'll trim it out in a minute and we'll make it look a little nicer. Sorry, I was repeating myself there. I'm pretty good at that. So we're just going to gently place a few thread wraps right over the top. We don't have to get super crazy with this part. Once you've placed 2 or 3 thread wraps over the top, just pull down. Just add a little pressure. We don't want to start adding a ton of thread here. Next, I'm going to take this material. Oh, I'm not behind the bead all the way. You do want to have your thread behind the bead. There we go. Next, I'm going to take the scud back, or whatever it is you're using for the wing case. You could use other stuff, other different fibers, and I mean whatever. It's the options are almost endless there. And we're going to reverse it to the back, and I'm just going to place about 2 or 3 thread wraps right on back. So on the, I'm sorry, I'm going to place 2 or 3 thread wraps right on top of the reverse material as it's leaning to the back. And now I can safely trim this out. Before you trim it out, again, make sure you're taking your thread, you're actually applying pressure coming down so that it really starts to tuck it in. Now what you can do is, I'm going to get my fingers in here so you can see. I'm going to grab it, I'm going to start to pull and stretch it. You don't want to overstretch this material. If you overstretch the material, you run the risk of having everything come undone by having it essentially just slip right back through your thread wraps. So, but you do want to stretch it. And I like the fingernail clippers there. Again, fingernail clippers are a great tool. If you don't have them in your arsenal, I really suggest you get some. Next, to build the collar, we're going to take our thread forward onto the bead. So we've just got this little wing case backing. You can make all this as big or as small as you want. We're trying to keep it a little simple. Some people will actually take this wing case and put their thread up onto the bead and then use and fill this entire gap here. If you want to challenge yourself, go ahead and do that. The flies can look really cool, and it does come out as a more full body. But you don't have to do that here. And we don't have to we don't have to be super precise as far as is the collar full or anything like that. I mean, we're talking fishing flies here for one, and two, we're actually just focused on how to use the CDC to get legs in. So that's just, again, that's all option stuff. If you're looking to glue the fly, again, like we had talked about in I think last week and maybe week 1 as well, glue your thread and do a wet whip. Don't try to directionally apply the glue. If the glue seeps into that CDC, you've really just ruined your fly as far as movement is concerned. So we'll just glue the thread, we'll work it onto the bead, pull it out, whip finish, and now your fly is essentially done. Okay. If you just don't like how far something sticks out, just take your pair of scissors, and I suggest really taking your time and trim them one at a time. A very curved pair of scissors that are a pinch scissor works especially well for this kind of delicate scissor work. You can also just use your fingers to pluck it away. If your tail's too long and you don't like the tail, take your predominant hand, slide it to where you want the tail to be trimmed out at, and then use your fingernails to trim that away. Same thing with your legs. Don't use scissors. It just doesn't look right. And you can just sit there and play with it and pluck it out as needed. So that's it. It's actually fairly simple to use CDC for legs on a nymph as well as a tail. When it gets into the water, it's going to all draw back like this. You're going to get some really nice little bubbles that build up along the side of the fly. The CDC likes to collect and trap and make little air pockets, which imitates a mayfly nymph very well. And so I don't know. There you go. That's it. It's fairly simple stuff. Again, sorry for the long videos, but I guess that's kind of why you signed up for the classes, so you can kind of get these explanations. Also, again, like I had mentioned, this is just kind of a generic color. Tie this in your favorite colors. You can absolutely change the color of the tail and the legs, the body. I mean, it's very universal. It's not. This little pattern does not have to be in a tan and sort of orange color. That's just what we chose to use for this particular fly, to get as many different colors of CDC into your hands for those of you that bought a material kit, and so that you had some more options as we're working through patterns for this session. So that's it. If you liked the video, as always, appreciate a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment below. If you have any questions, you can also find me over at Fly Tying for Beginners on Facebook. Just make sure you answer the questions, and that's your golden ticket in. And that's how you can actually get into the live classes if you've found this on YouTube and you're not a part of the live classes. So we'd love to have you. Other than that, as always, everybody, happy tying, take care, and we'll see you next time.